Article 5 means something, and that we stand by our commitments to our allies.
That was President Obama meeting with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg earlier this week in Washington. They talked about Article 5, part of the NATO Charter, which says an attack on one NATO ally is an attack on all. They also discussed the fight against ISIS. That meeting comes as criticism of NATO makes its way onto the presidential campaign trail. Last week, before his blowout loss to Ted Cruz in the Wisconsin primary, Donald Trump told the crowd that if NATO broke up, it would be no big deal. Before that, he called the organization obsolete. He's been criticized by rivals, both on the right and the left, but according to The Hill, some inside D.C. welcome Trump's NATO criticism.
All right, thanks, Miranda. Joining us now for more on this is Adam Ereli, who served as the ambassador to Bahrain under President George W. Bush. Thanks for joining us, Ambassador.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we want to discuss John Kerry's trip to Bahrain this week and Iran and this report about Iran gaining access to the U.S. financial system. But let's start with NATO. And I want to get your take and thoughts on what Donald Trump had to say most recently. Let's take a listen.
That means we are protecting them, and they are getting all sorts of military protection and other things. And they're ripping off the United States, and they're ripping you off. I don't care. I don't want to do that.
Ambassador, Trump's comments were not that far off base when you consider that most NATO members don't spend the required 2% of their GDP on defense. The U.S., the U.K., Estonia, Poland, and Greece, which is having a lot of financial troubles, are the only ones that seem to be able to pony up. So what did you think about Trump's comments?
I think they're misguided and short-sighted, frankly. NATO is more than just a check that we write to defend Europe. NATO is the reason that the United States and its allies are free. It played a pivotal role in ending communism, and today it plays a pivotal role in containing a resurgent Russia under an aggressive dictator, Vladimir Putin, who aims to project his influence into Europe, and without a strong alliance that confronts him, he will do it. I mean, he has already invaded one country, Ukraine, and seized part of its territory, and he has his eyes on other countries as well.
Well, Trump has talked about his affinity for Vladimir Putin. I would imagine the Russian president is enjoying this communication that we're having in this country, but there is something to be said about perhaps revisiting NATO, maybe making some adjustments, no?
Well, of course, but that doesn't mean you get out of it. It just means, NATO's like any alliance that has many states in it. There are different agendas, there are different capabilities, but it doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater if it's not working the way you want it to.
All right, well, let's move on. I want to talk about John Kerry. He's headed to Bahrain today. You, of course, were the ambassador to that nation, tiny island in the Persian Gulf. There's been some unrest in Bahrain as well. Talk about the significance of Kerry's visit there for this meeting with other Gulf nations and what's going on in Bahrain. Is it significant to the region?
I think it's hugely significant, primarily because Bahrain is on what I call a geostrategic fault line, if you will, the sort of San Andreas fault between the eastern Persian Gulf and the western Persian Gulf. On the east, you have Iran, a very aggressive expansionist power that seeks to project its version of radical Shia Islam into the western part of the Persian Gulf, meaning Saudi Arabia and our other allies, which produce most of the world's oil. And Bahrain stands in between them. And as a result, Iran has been focusing heavily on Bahrain. They seek to destabilize the country and, frankly, absorb it into Iran. It may sound extreme, but believe me, it's true.
Well, yeah, and as you mentioned, like as in the case in Saudi Arabia, you have a Shia minority there feuding with a Sunni majority government. So certainly something to watch. We'll keep an eye on John Kerry's visit.
Right.
Before we go, we got about a minute and a half left. I do want to talk to you about Iran. There's been reports that the Obama administration may allow Iran to gain access to the U.S. financial system. Yesterday, we reported here on this program that a member from the State Department, an official, told senators that that was not true. No such thing as a quote-unquote U-turn authorization. Should we take this official at his word?
I would hope so. I can understand why people might be kind of skeptical simply because You know, the United States has been rolling out the red carpet for the Ayatollahs in Tehran for quite some time. And the more we give them, the more they criticize us and the more they ask for. So I think it's reasonable to assume that that's what the Iranians want. I certainly hope the administration isn't going to give them another freebie. But I think it's understandable that people are skeptical and look at that statement with a little bit of doubt.
And when we hear these reports about how much money Iran may gain access to as the sanctions come down, what's the best number that you've seen that represents that?
Oh, you know, there are a lot of numbers, people from anywhere from 150 million on either side of 150 million. I think it'll take a while for the numbers to reach that level, but I think that the specific amount is not the important thing. It's Iran being reintegrated into the international community and being able to get a pass on its very destabilizing actions that it is taking in areas that the United States cares about, whether it be Syria or Iraq or Bahrain or Saudi Arabia.
Well, you mentioned Bahrain,
Yemen.
Ambassador, and we talked about that too. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there. We're out of time. We got to get to a commercial break. I do appreciate you joining us today, and thanks for your insight. Great talking with you.
Thank you.
We'll be back after this.